Hello, everybody. I'm sorry. I was watching myself and trying to see why my bangs are getting so long. Hey, Sarah. William, it's good to see you, darling. Hey, Gresty, my Dune brother. I'm glad you're here. So, it was a good day today. How did everybody have a good day? I hope so. I love you all. Oh, yes. Well, we're just going to go ahead and get started. Long day, Sarah. I'm sorry. That's no fun. Sarah keeps putting up new icons. She's got another new one. She got rid of her dog, which was actually, I think, her boss's dog or something. Hey, Ken, good to see you. Glad you could join us, darling. I know, Cresty. My Dune brother, it's every day is a good day, right? As long as you're up and walking, it's good. Love you all. Well, welcome back, my truth seekers. I'm Z, and I'm your storyteller in this wilderness of injustice, through the darkness that's mapping the twisted roads where predators hunt and justice fails. And as always, my ride or die doc is riding shotgun, ready to help us uncover the forgotten stories that the system would rather leave buried.
Hello.
So we're going to buckle up, because it's going to get bumpy as we're about to lead you through another chamber of horror, house of horrors that they call our justice system. Because it doesn't always get to everybody, does it? Right, Doc?
Yep.
So let's get started. This one says, I stand with angry cops. Yes, you do, Sarah. And I'm glad you do. We all do. Because he was right. Speaking out for the children. Well, tonight we're going to be talking about survivors, Indigenous women that found their voice after violence. And they've gone through some horrendous things. We're going to cover stories that highlight both the horrific violence they faced by these two women in Canada, but also their resilience as shown by the survivors. And it is outstanding and blows your mind what these two women went through at such young ages. Now, this is going to have some descriptions of sexual assault and violence. So, listeners, discretion is advised. We're going to focus on two women. And the first one we're going to cover is Rinelle Harper. And she's a teenager who survived a brutal attack in 2014. This is a picture of her. She was very shy. They said she was a very quiet, shy girl. And then we're going to share the story of Ashley Richard, another Indigenous woman who experienced parallels and many of the same issues. So let me take you back to November 7th, 2014, guys. Winnipeg, Manitoba, in November. 16-year-old Rinelle Harper was celebrating with friends because she had just completed her midterms. And if you completed your midterms, we all know that feeling. We're so glad it's over. And she was taking classes at the Southeast Collegiate High School for Indigenous students from the northern communities. So this was around midnight. She got separated from her friends in Winnipeg's South Broadmoor area. What next took place totally changed her life forever. Thank you, Sarah, for reminding him to hit that button. We also have available, if you want to buy us a coffee or leave a tip with Venmo. You don't have to. It's down there in the description if you'd like to. So as she got separated, and there's a picture of the river, 20-year-old Justin and from Popular River First Nation and his 17-year-old cousin, they later identified as Robert McKay, struck up a conversation with Rinelle. So at first they didn't give us his name because at the time he was a minor, but since then we now know his name is Robert McKay. Hey, therapist, I'm happy you joined us, darling. So they walked her to the Assiniboine River area. I hope I said that right. Where they suddenly turned on her. Fall is here. Everyone's going to get a hug. And the attack was vicious, you guys, and unprovoked. They beat her. They SA'd her. She ended up in the frigid river. They said the attack was so vicious, and they had hit her so many times. And they said that the water temperature that November night, because I looked it up, was between 0 Celsius to 5 Celsius, or for us people down here in the lower states, 32 Fahrenheit to 41 Fahrenheit. Canada does the Celsius thing. I would have never got that. I'm a Fahrenheit girl. But so it's cold enough to cause rapid hypothermia and muscle paralysis. So they said it wouldn't have totally, of course, been frozen over. And somehow she was partially closed. She's severely injured. I mean, this is just a young 16-year-old girl. She climbs out of this river. She pulls herself out of the freezing river. She's about 100 meters away. But they found her. Hey, Krista, darling, I'm glad you made it. Hope you're feeling better, sweetie. So they found her, that she was just 100 meters away. And here she is going through so much, and they start beating on her again. And this time they used a hammer and essayed her again. And they left her for dead on the right near the freezing water. And the poor thing, she suffered 34 separate bruises and lacerations. And it wasn't until 7 a.m. when some construction workers actually noticed her. And they quickly covered her with their coats. They called for an ambulance. One of them had even made the comment, all I could think of is, what if it was my daughter? So it just, they were very sweet people that took care of her. But when she got to the hospital, she didn't have a pulse at first. And she was in very critical condition. Her parents were rushed to the hospital as soon as they found out. But her parents and the police decided to release her name publicly because she was an SA victim, and because they needed some leads. They had no idea who had done this to her. So the decision was critical that they decided to do this, because normally they won't, especially because she was a minor. But the thing is, after attacking Rinelle, they found out something really disturbing. That Hudson, well, we only talk about their name once. So thing one and thing two went on to attack a 23-year-old woman just hours later, leaving her unconscious and a concussion and severe facial injuries. So they had really done a number on that poor girl too. Her name never did come out. But so by releasing the information, they were able to find another victim. And so they were able to then go ahead and locate the two, thing one and thing two. And so once they got them, she was still in the hospital and wasn't doing so well. This is a picture of the cousin, thing two, that he took in between the assaults. So he took time to, I guess, probably clean himself up and take a selfie, thing two. Yeah. So both attackers did plead guilty and to 2 counts of aggravated SA, and the court proceedings revealed terrible details of the attacks and also the backgrounds of the perps. Robert McKay here, 17, they said was diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome disorder and had an extremely low IQ. And they said that he suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder due to his childhood abuse. So he told them he felt pressured by his cousin, thing one, because he felt that if he didn't participate, he was going to be assaulted. Of course, this is what he said afterwards. And there were experts that noted that due to that fetal alcohol syndrome, that it could have made him more vulnerable to the peer pressure. So that's one thing they took into consideration. But despite these, oh man, can't talk tonight. Not going to be able to say that word. These mitigating factors, Judge Gerald Cartier ruled that McKay would be sentenced as adult. So that was good. The maximum youth sentence was only 3 years if they wouldn't have looked at him as an adult. And that they knew was not good for the public safety. So he ended up getting 17 years in prison. Now remember, this was back in 2014. So yes, he is still there, but 2014. So, and this was thing one. Thing one, he grew up partly in child welfare, received an even longer sentence of 23 years in prison because number one, he was older and he was really dangerous, you guys. I agree, Ken. That is a dumb word. It does have too many syllables. I've been reading so much today that my tongue is just tied. But I'm going to give it a good go here. So the judge noted that even though thing one's background or neglect and abuse was considered, the brutality of the crimes, they needed a lengthy sentence because they didn't only attack and SA this girl, they did it multiple times. And when they found her after she had been able to get herself out of that river, done it again, and then proceeded to go on and harm another female. Hey Doc, Falla wants you to check the coffee orders. Okay. Oh, let's see. I will give my phone to Doc. Maybe he can check. So, anywho, as recently as March 24th, Thing One actually came up for parole, but they denied him. Because at the age of 29, he continues to struggle with his mental health issues, addiction, and anger management. In fact, during his parole hearing, he said he gets frustrated and his anger comes out. The board also had a recent incident where he assaulted another inmate. So, yeah, he's not ready to come out. I don't know if that guy ever will be. When they asked him about his commitment to handling some of his issues, such as the anger and his addiction, he said he gave it a 3 or 4 out of 10 because he said that eventually he's going to go back to drinking and doing drugs. So right there, he told them that, he wasn't going to do anything about it. So that's really enlightening to think that this guy could eventually get out and this is how he feels. He is going to be a danger to society. Canada does not have as strong as sentences as the U.S. does. This is Rinelle. The picture below is her parents. And she is a strong, resilient, woman. I tell you, she was so brave. But Rinelle's story, even though it's so remarkable, the resilience she showed afterwards, you guys, just amazed me. Because just 2 weeks after her attack, she wanted to go back to school. Now think about this. She had been beaten and essayed and really harmed badly. But her mom was like, take some time off school, maybe sit out the semester. And she was like, I didn't want my experience to hold me back. She said, I was hurt. And my spirit, I hurt and my spirit was still powerful from a young age. I learned that education is a doorway to a better life. So she didn't want to miss out. So even though she was hurting and in pain, she says she completed that school year and then graduated grade 11 with all of her credits. But her challenges weren't over. And that summer, her family's home on the Garden Hill First Nation Reserve burned down completely. And so, because they were living in Winnipeg so she could go to school, but they had the house on the reservation. So it was gone. And once the school found out, well, unfortunately, they wouldn't take her back. So for 2 years, this had been her sanctuary. After her attack, that's where she found her support. But because they didn't have a home on the reservation anymore, she didn't qualify for on-reserve residence. So, she decided, she could either just sit and worry about these setbacks or find her voice. And so she became an advocate. In December of 2014, a month after the attack, she addressed more than 3,000 people at the Assembly of First Nations. And if you hear her on YouTube, she talks very softly. She's very nervous, a quiet girl. But she urged them to demand a national inquiry into the missing and murdered Indigenous women. The following year, she spoke at the first Canadian Conference on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. And then at the Wee Day in Winnipeg, Rinelle shared her message with 16,000 young people. She says, I want to teach people that change starts with us through education by understanding more about the world. And she says, we have to ask ourselves, are we contributing to the violence, or do we take responsibility to change our words and our thoughts? So a very grown up, stance that she took. Oh, Krista, your daughter went? That's awesome. Oh, I might have to talk with her and find out all about it. Because it's just what I'm hearing from here. Hello, Moo. Yes, you can say hello to everybody. So she was mentored by Amanda Linhout, herself a survivor of sexual violence during her captivity in Somalia. So she had someone that she could rely upon, and that was awesome. And together she helped prepare Rinelle for that day. And so she could deliver her message. She says, I didn't choose what happened to me, but I did choose to speak out against violence. And that's how I think of myself, not as a victim, but as a voice for change. And that's amazing. It said that Rinelle's case really highlighted the ongoing crisis of violence against Indigenous women in Canada. Her attack occurred just weeks after the body of Tina Fontaine. Fontaine? I think Fontaine is how we would say it here, but I don't know if it's the same up there. But she was another Indigenous teen who was found in the Red River. And while they tried to investigate both cases because they thought they could have been the same perpetrator, but it wasn't. And unfortunately, they kind of knew who more than likely deleted Tina Fontaine, which was Raymond Joseph Cormer, who was like 54 years old. And she was only a kid of like 15 or 16. But when they went to trial, the prosecution did not have a lot of good evidence. And so he was found not guilty. So Tina never got justice. And that's really sad. Therapist, is good at phonetically spelling. I am not. Me neither, sweetie. I just do the best I can. What can I say? But so one of these days I might look into Tina's case closer, but that poor girl, she didn't make it. But the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, of course, have reported that Indigenous women are disproportionately represented in cases of missing and murdered women in Canada. So despite making up just 2% Canada's whole population, Indigenous women represent more than 25% of female homicide victims. And there are several factors that really contribute. You have to look at the historical factors. Now, sadly, here in the States, they have started doing this thing where we're not going to look at our history because people might get their feelings hurt. Well, if you don't look at your history, you're bound to repeat it, people. I'm sorry, you just are. There's nothing to get your feelings hurt. You didn't personally do anything to these people, but it is part of our history. So we need to know about it. So you have the colonial legacy where they systematically displaced from their traditional lands and the destruction of their cultural practices. The resident school system where they forced assimilation, integrational trauma, which I am going to be digging into that more. Also, the 60s scoop, which was mass removal of Indigenous children from their families. And I just touched on this tonight, and it just made me ill. But it referred to the mass removal of Aboriginal children from their families into the child welfare system, in most cases without consent of the families or the tribe. And a lot of times they took infants out of their mother's arms to put them in child welfare. And they called this the 60s scoop, where they were just taking these children and then placing them in homes for Caucasian people. They said it was a common practice in British Columbia in the mid-60s to scoop from their mothers And this one woman that did this report, and they said newly born children. She said she was crying because she realized 20 years later what a mistake that had been. It took you 20 years to figure it out. You couldn't figure it out when you had some woman crying and weeping as you took her child away. I mean, I'm sorry. My husband's from a dairy farm. When they take a male calf away from its mother, yes. Well, we're human. Humans are going to take that a whole lot worse than even an animal. And if an animal loves its offspring or child that much, what do you think these poor women went through having their children ripped away? It hurts. And then although the practice of removing the children from their families and into the state care existed before the 60s, because that's when they had these residential homes that's a whole nother thing, people, whole nother thing. But it accelerated in the 60s with the scoop, when the children were seized and taken from their homes and placed, in most cases, into a middle-class Euro-Canadian family. The overrepresentation continues today. Children who are removed from their birth families and cultural heritage often face identity issues later in life. These challenges can emerge when they discover information about their birth families or their cultural backgrounds, because they probably don't know anything about who their family was. And according to social work professor Raven Sinclair, she said these experiences cause tremendous obstacles to the development of a strong and healthy sense of identity for the transracial adoptee. So when you think about that, here you have this child that is more than likely a different color than its parents, put in their totally different culture, all of a sudden finds out. How do they find out? Does somebody tell them where they actually came from? Do they find paperwork? I had a cousin who was adopted who found the paperwork, so things like this do happen. It says, but you might ask, what about today? And they said that sadly, the 60 scoop is now become the millennium scoop. So they're still doing it. They're still stealing children from people. And that just absolutely blows my mind that they would still be continuing to steal children. So there's also the systematic issues, which is the poverty and economic marginalized, limited economic opportunities in these communities, inadequate housing, there's overcrowding and unsafe living conditions because they stole their land. And anytime, and I know it happened here in the States, anytime the land might have showed up with something that was, valuable, well, they just would tell these people, no, we're going to move you back over here. And they would just push them and take more land away. So, of course, inadequate housing, geographic isolation, remote communities with limited access to services and protections, because some of these communities in Canada, they live way out there. There's racism and discrimination that is pervasive, stereotyping and discrimination within the institutions, law enforcement and justice challenges, historically inadequate police response. Why call the cops if they're either going to neglect it or delay investigations? And this can even happen here in the States, because I was noticing in Montana when I was looking for our missing people that we're going to discuss tonight at the end, there's a few missing teens and I'm calling them out, Fremont County, Wyoming. They don't even have these young girls in NamUs or in the missing and exploited children. They're like 15 and 16. The one's been missing since sometime in March. And they haven't even listed them. That's just wrong. Thank you, William, for the coffee. Appreciate it. So, that's just, I could have gone into a deep end on this subject, you guys. I'm sorry. I got a little carried away. But so then you have the confusion between, is it federal, provincial or Indigenous authority. We have that here in the States. You know, if a crime's committed on the reservation, is it the reservation's police? Is it the FBI? Because they can be called in. Do the states have any say? So there is a lot of confusion, and a lot of these different jurisdictions, they don't talk. I mean, let's buy them all a cup of coffee and show them how it's done. I mean, it's real easy, people. Sit down, shut up, listen with your ears, and someone will talk, and then it's your turn. It's not complicated. So, you know, that drove me crazy too. And then up there was the Indian Act, and these were the things that all came from it, you know, about the lower income level, you know, and the poorer health, because a lot of them don't have the health care they need, you know, especially when they live way out. That's one thing. Some of the reservations here in the US, some of them have started their own medical care. I know in California, a lot of them have, you know, facilities for medical care, which is really interesting. So underreporting, there's the mistrust of authorities due to the historical abuse. I watched a Instagram of a man probably in his late 60s, 70s, weeping from his experience in the residential homes. And it broke my heart because it was the abuse that he put up with. Those are things that people don't get over. And then it carries down into the generations. So then there's the social vulnerabilities. So you had the high rate of homelessness, forcing many into unsafe living conditions, which we're going to touch on with our next story. There's human trafficking, because they're going to recruit these vulnerable Indigenous women and girls. We saw that with that one serial killer there that would say, hey, you know, they're in Alaska. Hey, do you want a night, you know, to sleep somewhere safe? Yeah, that didn't work out, did it? So the substance abuse issue, it's often connected to trauma and not getting the correct treatment, because these people don't get the treatment that they should, and it's not fair. And then there's policy failures. There's the insufficient, you know, limited cultural appropriated services, historically unreporting and poor tracking systems, which truthfully I worry about here in the States, because right now it's like nobody's tracking anything because we have so much chaos. And how many people are going to fall through the big holes in our system right now? In fact, because of getting rid of, I guess it's the DEI or whatever, I don't try and get into politics, but one of the things that, you know, they've come out against is the transgender and the gay people. Well, up in Canada and the other Native communities, instead of talking about transgenders, it's a person who's two spirits is how they call it. But here, like NamUs and the Missing and Exploited Children's Network, they are making them take down the grouping that they had for transgender. So let's say you have a daughter who is transgendered into a male and she's disappeared, and you go fill out a form and you tell them that that daughter is a daughter when she's going to be dressed more than likely as a male. They are not giving them it's called dead naming if you don't call them by the name they choose. So if your daughter was Sally and she goes by Bob now, and you're calling my missing daughter Sally, you're dead naming her. If you have questions, it's just research I've done. So some of these numbers and some of these children are going to fall through the loops. These are some of the most vulnerable to sex trafficking. And that's what worries me. And that's where we get to the legal point. It's not the government's, whatever they're doing, they're insane. They do what they do. But it's the legal point that nobody will be looking for these children in the correct manner. And that scares me, because they're out there and who knows what's happening. So the public policies, like I was saying, you know, not tracking them correctly. How many times are they even not even taking a report. The chronic underfunding of Indigenous health and social services. So the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls concluded in 2019. Too bad that they're still happening, but hey, we concluded this inquiry. And they said that they declared this situation a Canadian genocide, resulted from the state's actions and inactions rooted in colonialism and persistent systematic discrimination. Okay? And that's why it is so scary, because that's, these poor people are out there and they don't have the backing that they need. I have a child. Oh, okay, Sarah, you have a child that's trans. Well, then you know about dead naming and all of that. I had come across it there is a trans site for missing and exploited trans people. And they actually got phone calls from reporters saying, what are you guys going to do? Because these big companies, and the reason NamUs and the missing, they said they don't blame those organizations for following these new laws, because most of their funding comes from the government, where the trans organization, they're not funded by the government. They collect their own monies from donations. I did have those numbers, Ken, but right now, because I kind of took this is what Doc and I call a Henry Jag. He used to have a guy that he worked with named Henry, and you could be talking about something like what we were talking about here, and then you just go off on another subject. So I took a Henry Jag with the trans situation. I am going to delve into that on another thing with my actual stats that I have. But yeah, it was afraid to look too, because it is sad, and they are trying to survive. And so I feel bad for NamUs and missing and exploited children, because they're just trying to stay alive in this time where everybody's getting their money taken away. And the sad thing is, these are our young people. They're the ones at risk, but it's happening in Canada. So it's happening everywhere. So they also have a fear and the mistrust of law enforcement, and who could blame them? Because I got some more stories to tell you about that on another night. So it often prevents the tribal community members from reporting cases, with many expecting law enforcement won't even respond adequately. There's the racism, the stereotyping, negative stereotypes, the police not even caring, because a lot of them don't, sadly. And also the centuries of hypersexualization and dehumanization of Indigenous women have contributed to this disproportionate victimization. Now, I could say that earlier. Hey, LaDonna, how are you? Thank you for coming in and hitting that thing, girl. I appreciate it. So there is also the data collection issues that we've talked about. So there is an inquiry into these cases, especially since Rinelle Harper's case back in 2014. But it's still a huge issue. It's still going on. Nothing's getting done. And that's the sad part. We need to see more action. And I think it's by talking about it, and it's by letting people know. They said in 2015, after years of the Conservative government in Canada resisting these calls, the Liberal Party and New Democratic Party decided to do this inquiry, which we found out in 2019 they stopped. But later the year, they got this established. So they got some numbers. So, we got that. Yeah, you're right, Ken. I don't know what would happen if NamUs disappears on us. Because that is huge. But this is Ashley Richards. We're going to get into her story now. It's even a little bit darker, but it has a super happy ending. Because I couldn't find out a lot about Rinelle's history, now, today. So she's probably taken a step back from the public because she was a very shy girl. But Ashley, she's out there, she's vocal. And she's powerful, you guys. Ashley is a member of the Metis and Ojibwa tribe, nation. I'm sorry. It's nation, not tribe, who experienced a traumatic attack at the age of 19. And then it almost made her a statistic. She almost became one of the missing and murdered Indigenous women. She had moved to Winnipeg 4 years after homecoming for Ashley went with her grandmother, Mary Richard, who was a revered leader in the Aboriginal community in Winnipeg. In the North End, Mary was affectionately known as the mayor of Main Street. I love that. So she had her grandma. Unfortunately, her grandmother's son, which would have been her dad, was an alcoholic. And he was actually dangerous. So the former CEO of the Thunderbird House Spiritual Center and executive director of the city's Indian and Metis Friendship Center had often cared for Ashley because of her father being such an unsafe alcoholic. But at 15, she had a conflict with her mom. So as all 15-year-olds do, she decided, I'm going to leave home, because she's smart. And Mary stepped in to help. She got her an apartment, but she couldn't stay with her. She had to go home because she wasn't feeling well. Her health, she had some issues. She had dialysis treatments. So Ashley was by herself at 15 with her own apartment. Now that spells disaster. And it said that Ashley fell in with some troubling company. Within a month, she faced eviction. She had a 40-year-old boyfriend at 19. This would have been when she was 15. And this man with no family, around serious drug addiction and abusive tendencies. But she says, I thought I was in love, And after a heated argument, he looked at her and he told her, I'm going to make it look like an accident. I'm going to snap your neck. And she believed him. So that night she stuffed her things into, her clothes and stuff into some bags and a photo of Mary into a garbage bag. And she got out of there. And then she realized she had nowhere to go. Yeah, big red flags, isn't it, therapist? Oh man, poor thing. She thought she knew what she was doing, but she didn't. So here she was with her bags on the street. So she started couch surfing. And she said, it's amazing how quickly you run out of friends that way because nobody wants to put up with you. And soon after that, her numerous absences from work shifts, because she was working at Blockbuster, she was working at Subway, and she ended up getting expelled from high school. But she was still too proud to go talk to her grandmother. I guess she didn't want to admit defeat. So Ashley was ashamed to reveal how severely her situation had deteriorated. Now, the Archbishop Romero, an alternative Catholic high school in Mississauga, offered her a second chance. And her teacher, Marjorie Gillis, noticed something about her. She said she had a clear hunger to learn and to get out of high school that the other kids didn't. He said, you could tell she was beaten down, but she was feisty, she was defensive. And is Matt here? Matt, hey, no problems, darling. I hope nobody was hurt too badly. No, we don't need the wood chipper just yet. Well, we could have used it for thing 1 and thing 2 who attacked the first little girl, but hey. Ashley could use one here. But so Ashley, she lived in a shelter. She said there were overdoses and violence all the time. And she says, I knew it wasn't for me. And she had to get out. She didn't know how. She just had no clue, how am I going to get out of here? Hey, she was only 15, 16 at the time. it's amazing that she kept going to school and that she was trying so hard. I mean, that in itself is amazing to me. But so she decided that, let me see where I'm at. It's coming. Doc say sometimes it gets a little slow. So for a year, she lived in these shelters where the overdoses and the violence and the mental health crises were commonplace. Something she saw every day. But she said that night she had gone out and she was waiting at a deserted GO train station because she had been out, and so she decided, I'm just gonna walk home. Never walk home. No hitchhiking, people. And a car pulled up. Where are you headed? And he claimed he was going in the same direction. And so she got in with him, but instead he took her to an isolated area near Lake Ontario where he violently assaulted and raped her. And I am saying the word rape because I have a video of her where she said that to her, when people will not say the word, they are not, she said, it makes you feel less. She said, we need to say it. We need to talk about it. You're right, therapist. Don't hitchhike, and it's never a mannequin. Those are my words of wisdom to all young people. So she fought back. She was kicking. She was punching, but she knew she couldn't win, and so she gave up. And she figured she was going to die. She was ready. But he let her go. So the walk home was horrendous because her phone had died. She was disoriented. She was in pain. And she got back to the shelter because she was still living in a shelter, people. And when she got there, she had a friend that lived there, and her friend just held her, and she sobbed. But Chanda Lewis held her, and then she said, I knew I needed help. So she called her teacher, Miss Gillis, who drove her to the hospital and then the police station. They never found her attacker. She gave a description, but they never found him. And so after that, she kind of unraveled. She had kept the assault from her ailing grandmother, but she was terrified to go to sleep, so she'd stay awake. And then she got a third job to avoid being by herself. She even got into alcohol, and she said it was getting bad. And she was just not even sure she was ready to live or die, but she needed to go see her grandma. So she went to see Mary, who had a kidney transplant by then. Hey, Christine, glad you're here. I've been hitchhiking for years and have had a couple of weirdos pick me up, but nothing bad has happened yet. Please don't hitchhike no more, Christine. I don't want to be doing a story about, hey, Christine was walking and took a ride and then this happened to her. No, we want you with us, Christine. No bad stuff. I mean, I'll be quite honest, back in the 50s, my mama hitchhiked. But that was way back then. So Ashley went to see her grandma. And at the time, her grandma kept asking her about having a car accident. And Ashley kept telling her, no, there was no accident. I'm fine, Grandma. And shortly after that, unfortunately, Mary died from her complications of her kidney transplant. And then not too long after that, she got in the car with a drunk driver and they hit a tree dead on. And she said, leaving her face very severely injured. And it was so bad that the nurses covered all the mirrors in her room because they did not want her to have to see that. Christine, we want you to be safe. We love you, Christine. You know that. I love all my people in my chat. I don't want anyone to be harmed. So, but Ashley said she couldn't stop thinking about how religious her grandma was, and had Mary somehow knew she was going to have an accident, or had her grandmother had a vision, She just didn't know. So she said, that put her on the path that she needed to be on. She had no family in Toronto or a few friends. And so she decided she was going to go to Winnipeg, where she had an aunt. And she enrolled in the University of Manitoba in 2013. She got a $15,000 a year Pauline and Roger Preslin scholarship, which helped her with Indigenous students pursue their post-secondary degree. In 2014, she was awarded a Manitoba Aboriginal... I cannot talk. My mouth is in the way. Thank you, Doc. I tell you, he keeps me straight, people. Youth Award, an Achievement Award. But she said, sadly, she has to admit that the car crash saved her life. She says, I hate that it happened, but she said she might not have come out of where she was at the time. And so she says, I lived through it, but I'm not broken. I'm not broken. And she's a beautiful girl. She is a beautiful girl. I mean, when you think of all she's been through, and she's still standing and strong. It said that Ashley is the director of Indigenous entrepreneurship at United College, University of Waterloo. She's been there for 13 years of experience supporting Indigenous and non-Indigenous youth communities, entrepreneurs, and youth. She holds a Master's of Management in Innovation and Entrepreneurship from the Smith School of Business at Queen's University, and a Bachelor of Commerce in Aboriginal Business Studies and Economic Development from the University of Manitoba's Asper School of Business. She was the recipient of a 2021 Distinguished Alumni Award, Outstanding Young Alumni from the University of Manitoba, the Oscar Lathan Memorial Award from Cannot. I'm not even gonna do it, Christine, because I'd probably butcher it, and then I don't want to insult anyone, of 2021. And she has published her research on Indigenous economic development in academic journals and reports, and served as a board member for the RRC Polytech for over 2 terms. She is a proud Indigenous woman with Metis and Ojibwe heritage, coming from the Richard family from Pine Creek First Nation and McLeod family from Camperville, Manitoba. So she's got a few accomplishments there. She makes me feel very lazy. I mean, when you think of what this girl has been through, she was brutally raped. She was out on her own. She had abusive boyfriends, lived homeless, got kicked out of school, got back in school, went through a terrible car accident, lost the only person she truly, truly loved, which was her grandmother. And yet look at what she has done with her life. So I look back at Rinelle's situation with those thing 1 and thing 2, and they talk about how bad their life was. Look what she did with hers. She didn't have, everything wasn't all peachy keen for her. She worked for it. To me, she's an amazing young woman. Christine, I'm from New Zealand, and I have something to say here. Maori are the worst for racism and crime and get sentenced to bugger all. Well, Christine, you will find my email, and anytime you want, give me an email and we'll talk about the Maori. I would love to hear some truth. I love knowledge. Anything you can give me, I am willing to learn. If there is a case you want us to talk about, even over there, I would talk about it. I will do the best research I can, and I rely on anybody. I have someone right now that's giving me research on another case. So whatever you can give me, I will gladly take, and we will chat. But both Rinelle and Ashley represent the remarkable resilience showed by Indigenous women in the face of devastating violence. Their stories not only highlight the crisis and the violence against the Indigenous women, but also the strength and determination and courage of the survivors. Many of them can trace their patterns of abuse and sexual violence in their families directly to these federally funded institutions like the schools, the residential schools. Yet what shines through these accounts isn't the darkness, but the triumph, an incredible capacity for resilience and forgiveness. In the words of Kim Jonathan, interim chief of the Federation of Saskatchewan Indian Nations, having lived through all that I am choosing to say I am not going to be next. And I am speaking up for our sisters, the missing and the murdered, whose voices have been stolen. This is not just an Indigenous problem, it is a Canadian problem, and by extension, a North American problem. And we know that. We know it is. We have it down here, and it's everywhere where we have Indigenous and Native women. And it breaks your heart to hear the stories. But that's why we speak about it. That's why we're going to get up and yell about it. And we're going to do whatever we can to help. The voice of survivors, Rinelle and Ashley, help us understand how we arrived here. It humanizes those losses and lends strength to the women who continue to suffer. It's even a deeper problem. It is a problem that the U.S. as well as with the murdered and missing and murdered. And if you or someone you know has experienced sexual assault, please remember that help is available. In Canada, the crisis lines is 1-833-456-4566. That's 24/7. The text, which is 45645, is only from 4 p.m. to 12 a.m. Hope for Wellness Helpline is 1-855-242-3310. Talk for Healing Indigenous Women, 1-855-554-HEAL-4325. Those are all Canadian numbers. And I focused on Canada tonight, so that's why they're there. But I also gave a U.S. number, which is the National Sexual Assault Hotline at 1-800-656-HOPE or 4673, or chat online at online.rain.org. So if anyone's been through any of this, reach out. Get help. Don't handle it on your own. Get help. Okay, we're going to talk about some missing people. Now, this is where I called out Fremont County, Wyoming. We will say it again. Fremont County, Wyoming. Why are you not listing these girls in NamUs? This is Latea Willow. She's 15. She was last seen March 3rd, 2025. Latea Willow. And I mean, come on. They need to be getting this, She needs to be in NamUs. Let me see if I got all my information here. And Latea Willow is 15. She was last seen March 3rd wearing black t-shirt, sweatpants, Converse tennis shoes, and possibly a red hooded sweatshirt. She's Native American female with brown eyes, black hair, standing 5'2" and weighing 110 pounds. The RPD is listed as the agency in charge of the case. So 307-856-4891 or the DCI at 307-777-7181 with any information you have on this young lady. This is Veronica Cruz. This makes me mad. This young lady, has been missing from the same group home that Emily Pike disappeared from in Mesa, Arizona. She went missing before Emily Pike. And this is aggravating because night therapist, I'm glad you stopped in. We're winding up here, but this young lady has been missing for a year now. And she was, I think they said 17 when she went missing on May 18th. Oh, it'll be May 18th. She'll be missing a year in 2024. No trace of her has been found. It said we gained this knowledge when they went through about with Emily Pike. That's how we found out about her. And it said that the CEO of the group home claims that somebody contacted them saying she's safe, but they can't tell you who it was, where she is, or who she's with. So how safe is she? I mean, please, someone explain that to me. If you have no information on where she is, who she's with, how do we know she is really safe? I mean, that just sounds like a bunch of BS. In fact, the police said, she's still a minor. And I'm mad that the police aren't digging into this more myself. That, until they lay eyes on her, she's not considered safe. So if anyone has a tip, please contact Mesa PD. And she's 17, soon to be 18. And I guess that's when they can all just pretend she doesn't exist anymore. I don't know. That's infuriating. But let's get on to our next one because that's just making me mad. But that's Veronica Cruz, guys. So missing in Mesa, Arizona. And everybody's just pretending it's not happening. And that's wrong. Okay, this young man is Karanda Maristi. He's from Prince Albert Police Service, is requesting public assistance. He's only 12. He's 5'5". He has brown eyes, short brown hair. He weighs 130 pounds. He was last seen in the 2000 block of 15th Avenue East at approximately 6:30 p.m. on April 27th, 2025, Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. So he hasn't been missing that long. Let's hope he gets found. They said that he was last seen wearing a red sweater and red pants. If anyone has information on his whereabouts, Keandra Mariste is asked to contact police at 306-953-4222. If you want to be anonymous, 1-800-222-8477. So that's the three missing people that we picked out tonight. There's so many, you guys. There are so many. But I tried to, we got a young man from Canada, a young lady from Wyoming, another young lady from Mesa, Arizona. I try and pull from different areas. We never know these kids, if unfortunately anyone has been trafficked, we never know where they could end up. So remember, when you're out and about, put the cell phones down, pay attention, see if you see something, because that would be awesome if someone could get these kids found. I mean, that's what we want. We want them found. And that's the most important thing. Let me see here. My computer. Okay. So it says, 12 years old. Hopefully he just got mad at mom and dad. Good night, William. Now remember, whoops, there we go. So join us next week. We're going to explore another case that deserves our attention. I think on Sunday, we're going to talk about some Jane Does. So those could be some interesting cases. If you guys have any ideas or a case that you've heard about that you want us to chat about, please let us know. This is Trial Junkies United. I'm Z. Over there's Doc. Just remember there are real people behind every case that we talk about. These are just real people, you know? So every killer counts on your silence, guys. Don't be the reason that we're telling another story on this channel. If you know something, say something. Because that wasn't a mannequin. It never is. So until next time, stay informed and stay compassionate. I love y'all and thank you for coming. And I appreciate it. And we'll see you Sunday. Night.